Hey there guys, it's Tina and I am back and it is time to talk about Fenty Beauty by Rihanna. This is my very first purchase of the year and my very first review of the year, and I'm actually excited that it is by Fenty Beauty because it's a brand that I love, I support, I love the direction of the brand, I love their campaigns, and I love how they have been slowly releasing products and building on the foundation of the brand rather than trying to come out with just a ton of product all at once. They've been adding little signature items along the way, and then they do their limited edition releases as well. And I love how inclusive they try to be with their campaign images, with their shade range. I just love everything about the approach of this brand, the marketing, and also the products themselves, because I feel like it's a nice rounded collection. So for this launch, we have concealers, setting powders, and an extension to the foundation range, along with a couple of face brushes. I picked up two items from the collection. I picked up the concealer and the powder to test them out, but I also went in store to check out the products, and I did swatches for you guys, so we're going to show them later in the video. But I wanted to see if any of the new foundation shades were closer to my match. I also swatched the concealers in the 300 range, which is where my foundation falls, so you can get an idea of the shades that are available. And I swatched 4 of the powders that are closest again to my skin tones. Now before we jump into the demonstration and the swatches, I wanted to run through some quick details of the products that are included in this video. So for the foundation, even though it's not new, there are 10 new shades added to the lineup, bringing it to a whopping 50 shades overall, and there are various undertones, and it's separated into 4 different categories. So you have shades 100, 200, 300, and 400, and it's from light, medium, tan to deep, and then dark. So depending on your complexion, I fall in the tan to deep range, so my shades are all in the 300. That's how you would narrow down where you find your match, and then you would go by the undertone, and they have neutral undertones, olive undertones, golden undertones, more peachy undertones. So you'd have to do swatches, and the tricky thing about this is because there's so many different undertones, if you get a shade that's not your perfect match, it's not gonna look good on your skin tone. And that's a problem for me because I haven't been able to find a perfect match. The closest I've gotten is 360. I still have to tweak it a bit. It's what I'm wearing right now. Obviously, everything on my face is from the new launch, but I haven't been able to find my perfect match, and I do have to mix this with another foundation just to get a good shade match. So like I said, there are now 50 shades to this foundation. It retails for $34, and it includes 1.08 fluid ounce of product, which to me is a pretty decent amount of product. It's typically 1 ounce. You get a little bit more than the average foundation on the market, and it's $34, which I think is a good price for a medium to high-end range foundation compared to like Too Faced and Smashbox. They all are in the high 30s to $40 range, and then you have higher end foundations that are $40+ $50+, and this to me is just a decent price point that people can still manage, but it's still in that higher end range. As for the concealer itself, it has a matching 50 shades, so each shade of foundation has a corresponding shade in the concealer. It's not an exact shade match. It's a little bit lighter than the foundation itself. Now the concealer retails for $26, and it contains 0.27 fluid ounce of product, which is on the lower side of concealers. I was surprised by that. At $26, that's pricey for a concealer. A lot of concealers in the mid-range brands are in that high $20 price point or in the $30 price point, which is just absurd to me. Like, how is a concealer this expensive? And it only contains that 0.27 ounce of product. I found that concealers like the one that came out from Too Faced, they're giving you more and more product for the same price or a similar price point. So the Fenty one is a little bit less product than I would like. It's kind of middle of the bar, but still it's a little bit steep for a concealer price. Now the packaging of the concealer and the foundation are very similar. They're very cute, right? Even the primer itself that they have, I love the packaging. It's like a frosted glass packaging. This is more of a hard plastic packaging. Still has that beautiful cap on it with the Fenty Beauty and the shade on the bottom. And the applicator is just a flat doe foot, so it doesn't have a curve to it. It's flat paddle size, just enough to apply product under your eyes without applying way too much, but it doesn't have a precise applicator to it. I personally do like that applicator. As for the new powder, there are 8 shades of this powder, and this retails for $32, and it contains 0.98 ounce or 28 grams, which is about the size of most loose powders on the market. They typically contain 30 grams, which this one contains a little bit less. $32 is another price point that I can tolerate as well. I feel like that price point is typical for mid-range brands. Again, there are 8 shades, and there are 2 shades per shade range. So for the 100s, 200s, 300s, and 400s, there are 2 shades available each. One is for brightening and one is for all over settings. So you can still mix and match and get across the range. Like, you don't have to stick to your shade range, but there are 2 options available just in case. So it's a hard plastic jar, and it's an octagon shape. It has the shiny cap with the loose powder in the bottom. Now, when you get this in the box, it's packaged a little bit differently because you have this insert that is separate. It is not attached to the actual powder jar itself. You have to apply this or position this yourself. It gets a little messy, as with most loose powders. I don't know how they can make this any better. I think Hourglass is the only company that I've seen so far that got it right, where it's not as messy. Loose powders just get everywhere. They get all over the place. Even when they have the little lid to secure it, it still gets all over the place, because the whole thing is you're gonna get product into the cap. You're probably gonna get too much, then you're gonna have excess powder. Where are you gonna put the excess powder? In the cap itself. It's a whole thing. So this is not necessarily the most mess-free packaging, but it's cute. It looks luxurious. I do like it. It feels weighty. But it's gonna get messy everywhere. All right, now that we have spoken about all those details, let's go ahead and jump into the demonstration, where I will also show you swatches and talk you through the actual products. So as usual, I'm starting off with a clean, freshly washed face, and what I'm gonna do is apply my skin prep products. So all my skincare that I usually use in the morning time. So I'm gonna go in first with my fresh Rose Deep Hydration Facial Toner. This is just a lightweight treatment essence. It preps the skin, allows it to be nice and hydrated to begin with. So I'm going to apply that and allow it to sink in. After a few minutes of allowing that to absorb into my skin, I'm going to go in with my Ole Henriksen Truth Sea Rush Brightening Gel Cream. This is my moisturizer of choice. I really like this moisturizer, so I just get a little bit in the palms of my hands and press it into my skin. Apply it mainly around my mouth and my drier spots on my cheeks and on my forehead area. Again, I'm going to allow this a few minutes to settle into my skin before moving on to the next step, which is my eye cream. This is the Drunk Elephant C Tango Multivitamin Eye Cream. I've been rotating between different eye creams, but I always use one with vitamin C in it, so I'm just going to apply this directly under my eyes and allow that to absorb as well. All this skincare is going to sit on my skin for a few minutes, and I'll show you what it looks like after I've applied everything. So my skin is nice and hydrated, it's plump, it's firm, it's ready for any makeup that we're going to apply over it. So you'll see that I have some discoloration around my mouth. I have some acne scarring between my brows, on my cheek area. I do have some hyperpigmentation and dark spots, but usually foundation will cover this up. So this is what we're starting out with. So now that the skincare is pretty much completely absorbed into my skin, I'm gonna go in with my first step. And since we're doing Fenty today, I'm gonna keep it kind of all one brand. So I'm using the Pro Filt'r Primer. This is said to be a shine-stopping, pore-diffusing primer that smooths the way for better foundation application and longer wear, and it gives an instant retouch effect. This has more of a lotiony consistency than like a silicone dry feel. It does feel very hydrating, so when I apply this, I actually allow it to sit on my skin for a few minutes because, again, very hydrating, and with products like these, I want it to sit and absorb before I go in with the next layer. To me, it doesn't really do anything to my skin to blur pores or minimize lines or anything. It just feels like a hydrating primer. It actually feels like a moisturizer, so this is not my favorite primer, not for my skin type anyway. Now, since I don't necessarily like this primer for oil control, I'm going to use my Can't Stop Won't Stop foundation primer. This is a matte primer from NYX Cosmetics, and I'm going to apply that around my nose and in my pore area right next to my nose, right by my cheeks. This is where I have enlarged pores, I have oily areas, and I'll apply a little bit just between my brows as well because I have a little bit of a spot here that needs some coverage. So you see that instantly mattifies my skin. So we're gonna go ahead and start out with the foundation, which of course is the Pro Filt'r Soft Matte Longwear Foundation, and it says it's a soft matte longwear foundation with buildable medium to full coverage in a boundary breaking shade range of 50 shades. So it says here, this longwear and light as air foundation gives skin an instantly smooth, pore diffused, shine free finish. The oil free formula is made with climate adaptive technology that's resistant to sweat and humidity and won't clog pores, so that wherever you are, it's going to work on your skin. They have added 10 shades to the range, and I personally haven't been able to find my perfect match. I have been using 360, which is my most recent purchase, and this shade says it is suitable for tan skin with neutral undertones. And I find that neutral undertones just suit me better. Some foundations that have golden or yellow undertones have just gotten way too yellow for my skin tone. And out of the shades that they added shade 45, which I went to test out because I was like, maybe that's close. It's for tan skin with warm olive undertones, which I was like, all right, that may be something that I can look into. No. I'm gonna show you swatches of this foundation. So 345 is the one that I'm showing you right now. You can see it's very mustardy. Then we have 350, which is more of a neutral peachy undertone. 360 is the shade that I find that suits me best. It has that neutral undertone. 370 is another shade that I've tried, and it just leans a little bit too peachy, a little bit too orangey on my skin when it dries down. 380 is again more orange than I would like. Then they have 385, which is another new shade. So we have two new shades in the range that would suit my skin tone. And 385 says it's for tan to deep skin with neutral undertones, which is another one that I'm thinking might work for me. But I found that it's a little bit too dark for me right now, and it looks a little bit too gray. So what I'm gonna do is get a sample of that to try out in the summertime when I have more of a tan. But right now, I still haven't found my perfect shade match, so we're using 360, and I mixed in a little bit of my Dior Forever Undercover 24-Hour Full Coverage Foundation. This just adds a little depth. So this is the foundation, and I added a dot of the darker foundation. So I'm gonna apply that with a clean foundation brush. This is an Artiste brush. It's the Oval 8. And I like to apply my foundations with a brush. I know people do like sponges. For me, I just prefer a brush, and a smooth buffing brush such as the Artiste brush is like perfect for this foundation, especially since it is a matte finish. I feel like when you use a brush, you can really buff the foundation into the skin and lay the hairs on your skin down so it doesn't catch and doesn't look too drying on the skin. Now that may be different if you have dry skin, because a brush is then gonna almost do a light exfoliation, which you might not want it to bring up the drier patches on your skin. So then you would just go ahead and apply your foundation the way you prefer, either with a beauty sponge or with your hands. So I apply that all over my skin. So you see, I can create a pretty nice match with the 360 if I just blend in a little touch of a darker foundation. So here we have it. That's the foundation applied. I really like this foundation. It glides over the skin really well. I've been liking it a lot more in the winter months, the cooler months, because it just lays so well on my skin. And because I'm oily, it doesn't feel too drying at all. And I'm surprised that it doesn't work as well in the summer months. I feel like I get oilier in the summer months, and maybe I wasn't using the right primer. But we'll figure that out later in the year. But for now, I really love this foundation. So here is the foundation up close. As you can see, it has really decent coverage. It's a nice color match after I added a little bit of tweaking. But it covers my hyperpigmentation, my acne scarring. You can't see it at all. So I do think it is a medium buildable coverage. I wouldn't go full coverage where you expect it to be like a mask at all, but it does a really good job. I say it's a light full coverage foundation. It does try to settle into lines a little bit, but that's nothing that I have an issue with. I can just blend that out. But now we're gonna go ahead and jump into the concealer, because that is the new product to the lineup. So this is the Pro Filt'r Instant Retouch Concealer. there are 50 matching shades to the foundation. So the way this works is you get the coordinating shade to your foundation. It's not an exact shade match. It's just slightly lighter because it's going to give you that lifting effect, especially if you use it under your eyes. So it says it's a creamy Longwear crease-proof liquid concealer with light as air, medium to full coverage that brightens under the eyes and conceals blemishes and redness. This also says it's free of parabens, phthalates, and it's cruelty-free. And their suggestion is to start with your Pro Filt'r foundation shade. For me, it's 360 and go from there. So if you like added brightness, you would go down a shade, or if you want one for contouring, which I don't necessarily recommend contouring with concealer shades. I personally don't like using concealer to do contouring because it's a heavier full coverage product. And when you layer full coverage on top of full coverage, it can get really heavy, really cakey, really fast. So I skip that. I'll just use a lightweight powder. So I went ahead and swatched all the 300 shades, which would be the shade range I choose from because I'm a tan to deeper skin tone. So you'll see a range of undertones in what I'm showing you here. You have peachy undertones, more olivey undertones. Again, you have that mustard shade, which is the 345. You have very peach looking tones as well, which can be good for canceling out under eye darkness. But on my skin tone, they look very intense. Then we have more olivey tones, and then of course the more orangey shades. I didn't see too many red undertones in this range. Those fall in the 400 range. But for me, the perfect match is the 360 because even the shade down is too peach, the shade up is too orange, and when you blend them out and pat them down, they do dry down a little bit darker. So what I did was I blended out 6 of the shades that are closest to my skin tone so I can show you what the shades look like. And again, 360 is my closest shade match. It has that olivey neutral undertone that I need, and the other shades just are a pinch too orange, a pinch too peach. It's just a pinch of peach. Oh, it is just too peachy for my skin tone. So I'm definitely skipping those and sticking to 360. So all of that, let's go ahead and apply this concealer. So I'm going to apply a touch of that under my eyes. I'm not going to go too crazy because I can get away with concealer sometimes and I don't like that look. So I'm just going to apply, that may be a little bit too much. I'm going to tap a little bit on the center of my forehead, and I want to go around my mouth as well. So I'm just going to tap where my darkness is, right around my mouth area, and I have a little darkness on my chin. That's a lot of concealer, but we're gonna hope this blends out. So I'm grabbing my e.l.f. sponge. This is a stiffer sponge. I really love this sponge for blending out concealer. This is where I would use a sponge now instead of a brush because I want to ensure that the coverage stays in place. With a brush, you're gonna move the product around. With a sponge, you can tap over it and keep the coverage exactly where you want it. And you see the concealer is blending in really well and it's not dragging too far away. It feels like a thicker cream. It's not as liquidy as the foundation. It actually feels pretty comfortable, but it doesn't feel too hydrating. It says it does set by itself, so we'll see how that goes. So tap it out, and the coverage that I'm getting, I'm a little bit nervous because when you get olivey undertone concealers, if you don't color correct first, it can still give this gray cast under your eyes or around the darkness, like around my mouth. So I'm a little bit nervous about how that's gonna go, but let's just blend that out and let it sit down for a little bit. I can see where it's kind of highlighting the areas that I placed it. Can you see that on camera as well? Let's see if you can. I applied it between my brows where I have that dark area and it's a little bit more highlighted. We're gonna just let that happen. Under the eyes, I really like the brightening effect. And even around my mouth, I also like the brightening effect. But we're gonna set that down with powder because there is a powder also with this concealer. But I want to see if it settles under my eyes where I have lines. I expect that with any concealer. So let's go ahead and see. It is gonna crease under your eyes. And to be quite blunt, that's an expectation for me because I have lines under my eyes. So why wouldn't product settle under there unless I am like really superhuman and it created this blurring effect or whatever. So I like that, but we're gonna go in with the powder now. Now the powder is the Pro Filt'r Instant Retouch Setting Powder, and there are 8 shades, and there are shades for each skin tone range. So for the 100s you have Butter, which is a lighter yellow shade. Lavender is a brightening shade for, again, the 100s. You have Banana, which is a brightening shade for the 200 range, and Cashew is the setting powder for the 200 range. For my range, Honey is the brightening shade, and Hazelnut is like the setting powder. And then you have Nutmeg, which is brightening for 400, and then Coffee, which is the setting shade for the 400. So what they did is they included a lighter brightening shade, so you can use that under your eyes. Then you can use the all over powder shade just to set everything. So for me, I went ahead and swatched the shades that look closest to my skin tone that I would want to choose. So I'll go ahead and show you what the powders look like in person. And I'm gonna swatch the 4 shades for you. The Banana shade is definitely a light yellow tinted powder. It's almost translucent, but it is very light. That wouldn't suit me. If you go for really light under eyes, maybe you will go for that. The Cashew shade in the 200 range for setting foundation, that looks a little bit too peachy for me. When I swatched it on my arm, I could definitely see the orangey peach peeking through. Honey was an interesting shade on me because it leaned very golden, and I actually like the golden effect because it can help to balance out my skin, but it also, where it touched like wet spots on my arm, you'll see that it darkened around the edges to almost a little bit orangey. So I'm nervous about that one, but that's the shade that I picked up. And then the actual setting shade that they have for us, which is Hazelnut, that was definitely too deep for my skin tone, and it comes off very, very orange. And I'm just like, I'm not here for that at all. So I skipped that one. And even though I'm like mid-range in the 300, so 360, I still went for Honey, which is the brightening shade. And I almost feel like this would be a better setting powder than the Hazelnut shade that they wanted to use for all over, which is just too dark for my skin. So I'm gonna go in with the Honey shade under my eyes, and I want to show you from a distance what it looks like. So you'll see it definitely is darkening up under my eyes. I don't know if you can tell, but it isn't giving a lifting brightening effect, but it does give a blurring effect. Now let's go ahead and zoom in so you can see how it works on the other side of my face. So I'll give you a closer look at the Honey shade. You see it's a golden yellow powder, and I'm going to apply it under my eyes with the Dampened Beauty Blender. Now, what I showed you in the video from in store, you can see it happening. Once it catches on to a moistened area on the skin, it deepens and darkens and almost gets a little bit orangey, which I don't mind, but it's something that you have to be mindful about. Now, it does look very airbrushed, but you see it adds this darkness. It definitely doesn't keep that lighter look to the under eyes. Now, it did nothing to help with this crease that I have under my eye right here. So I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like it should have helped, but it didn't, and here we are. So since this powder is not necessarily something that I would use for brightening or lightening, I'm just going to use it all over my face to set the foundation. We're going to just use my Smashbox powder foundation brush. This is a kabuki brush. And I'm just lightly getting some of the powder. It's a very airy, lightweight powder. It definitely gives a beautiful airbrushed finish to the skin. It doesn't have a scent. It has a very light vanilla type scent. Is that what I'm smelling? Like, I barely smell it, but it's pleasant. You know that kind of powdery scent? That's kind of what it has. So I'll just use that all over my skin, and I'm just lightly going over my foundation and around the concealer. Let me put a little bit more around my mouth because, you know, whoo, crease and child. For me on camera, it looks really good. It looks flawless. It looks really nice. Up close, I can see that it looks like powder on my skin. It looks a little bit like foundation, like makeup. But then like just regular distance, looking in a regular mirror, not the zoomed in mirror, it just looks nice. But it looks like I'm wearing makeup, which I'm okay with because I'm wearing makeup. Like, who am I fooling? All right, so here it is up close. You can see it looks airbrushed and flawless. It does look really, really good on my skin. I will not pretend it doesn't. I want to use this under the eyes for brightening. You'd probably want to go with the banana powder or just stick to your regular powder because this does darken up a bit. But I like how it looks on my skin, so I'm going to finish getting ready and then we'll do a little check-in before we run out the door. Now for the powder itself, it says it's a super fine, weightless, loose setting powder in 8 sheer shades to perfect and extend makeup wear for a filtered, photo-ready finish on lock. And I do think that the overall finish that I've gotten is airbrushed. It looks pretty on the skin. Now I do agree that it feels very lightweight on the skin. It's a very fine powder. It does leave this airbrushed look to my skin. But at the same time, I feel like when I really get up close or I'm in bad lighting, like I just went into my bathroom, it looks, I don't know if it's the concealer, the foundation, the shade match, it just looks a little gray. It looks a little textured by my pores. And it looks a little cakier than I would like. But when I'm sitting here looking in the camera, looking in my mirror, looking up close, it doesn't look like that. So I'm not sure what's going on, but we're gonna wear and see how this goes. But it does say it's super fine. It is super fine. It says it's a sheer coverage though, which I don't necessarily think is sheer. There is some color to it. You're gonna get coverage from this. I would think it's more of a lightweight coverage, even buildable to medium, because I did get some color payoff. And as you saw in the swatches that I showed you, it's gonna show up on your skin. So I wouldn't go necessarily with sheer, but it's sheer enough where you can use it on a range of skin tones and it wouldn't show like a definite difference between the shade coverage. In other words, it won't change the foundation shade a ton. But just be mindful, if you get a darker shade, it's gonna show darker on your skin. If you get a lighter shade, it's gonna show up as lighter and brighter on your skin. So overall, I do like how it looks so far, with little things that I noticed in my bathroom, bad lighting, and I'm wary about what it's gonna look like. But we're gonna show you in the sunlight. We're gonna wear this throughout the day and we're gonna get right into it. And right now the time is 11:39. So I've been wearing this for the last, I believe, 40 minutes. So I've had this on since 11 and we're gonna just go and see what the day brings us. So stay tuned. So here we are in daylight and I think it looks pretty decent. I don't see, I mean, you can see, I think you can see the texture, like you can see my pores showing up. And I don't know if that's, yeah, like the lines, I don't know if that's the foundation, the primer, the concealer, like what's going on. The concealer is definitely going to be the part under my eye, which creased and didn't really stay in place. And then the powder didn't help it. So maybe I need to wear this differently or test it out again, because right now I'm not thrilled at this present moment, but we're gonna keep going. But here you have it in daylight, like I literally just came outside. So we haven't worn this a full hour yet and this is how it looks. All right guys, so it's coming up on 6 p.m. So we had this on since 11 o'clock. So roughly 7 hours, close to 7 hours of wear, and I have blotted throughout the day. So I've just gotten a napkin and just pressed over my skin to get rid of some excess oil, but just in my T-zone and my forehead area. And this foundation, the concealer, the powder, everything wears pretty much as I expected. It looks just about right for this amount of wear from any foundation on my oily skin. And I'm not completely mad at it. I do have some settling in my smile line. So you'll see, you can see my line showing up. And it does look a little bit cakey. Let me zoom in. It does look a little cakey right here between my brows. Do you see that? That's where we had the concealer. We also had the concealer around my mouth area. Now, to be fair, the expectations for this have been met. I didn't expect it to be great or anything. It doesn't blow me away. It's not the best combination I've tried. It's also not the worst. And it hasn't slid off my face, so I don't have any patchiness. Oh, I didn't show you under my eyes. Yeah, let's show you under my eyes. So the creasing didn't get any worse. I didn't get any oilier under there. In fact, under my eyes, you can see the difference. Under my eyes looks a lot drier, a lot more matte. Not dry, but like matte under my eyes versus the rest of my skin that has the oil speaking through. That's what usually happens with my skin. So I'm not like thrilled about this foundation. I'm also not disappointed in it. It's just average at this point for me, as is the concealer and the powder. But we're gonna try it out some more days. I'm gonna test it out. I don't like doing first impressions. So we're gonna wear it, test it, do different combinations of moisturizer, primer, all that stuff, and then I'll come back and give my final thoughts in a couple of days. So I'll talk to you soon. Alright guys, so here goes the second round of testing. I got a sample of shade 385, which is one of the newer shades, and I wanted to test that shade out because I think it's a better skin tone match, but it looks a little bit darker when it dries down on my skin. So it would be more of a summer shade for me, but I said I still want to try it out just in case it might be a great match. And my neck is definitely lighter, especially in the winter time, than my face. So the color is gonna look fine on my face, but then I'm worried about matching my neck. For this skin prep, I only use toner. So I use the Fresh Rose Deep Hydration Facial Toner, and I applied 2 layers of this and let that absorb fully into my skin. I didn't go in with an additional primer. I just let that very lightweight toner sink into my skin. In addition to grabbing the sample of the foundation, I grabbed an additional shade of the concealer. So this is the 385 again, which matches this foundation. The foundation shade actually looks pretty good, so I am hopeful that this is gonna be a good match. So I'm applying it again, dark areas, dark spots, and under my eyes. And I'll blend that out with the e.l.f. sponge again. I didn't apply as much of the concealer anymore because, you know what? Every time I get on camera, I start applying way too much concealer. I never apply that level of concealer in real life, so why am I putting that much on camera? It's one of those things. It's the performance. You get online and you do all these things that you don't normally do every day. So for me, this concealer shade is actually better suited to my preferences. I don't like too bright of an under eye. I don't like bright concealer at all. I want a concealer that is closest to my skin tone. And this actually looks pretty decent under the eyes, but it still gives a lift, which is interesting. You see it's a little bit lighter. Do you notice that as well? Blends out really nice. And the color, again, like I said, is really nice. So it still creases under my eye, and I'm not in love with that, but I'm gonna use my La Prairie powder instead to set it, which is what I would normally use for under eye concealer instead of using the Fenty one, to see if the concealer just works better with my preferred powder instead of with the Fenty, because the Fenty to me it creased anyway. It didn't really add lift. I feel like that is more of an all-over powder if you're going for the brightening effect. The powder actually looks much better under my eyes. There are no creases or anything. I'll show you up close. And instead of using the powder on this foundation is drier, it's matter, so I feel like if you it's more matte. So instead of using a matte powder over a matte foundation, I'm gonna go in with more of a radiant, not necessarily glowy powder, but one that is more of a satin skin type finish instead of all matte. This is the Charlotte Tilbury powder. Now let's go ahead and show you up close. Under my eyes, I still have lines, but the creasing is not happening right now. It's not settling into my lines with that powder that we use. The skin looks great. Don't mind this harsh line. This is what happens when you wax your little sideburn. But the color looks great. It's just gonna look different on my chest and neck area because it is a little bit darker. But with that powder, I don't have any creasing in my lines on my forehead and my smile lines just yet. I expect that to happen. If I'm honest with you, that usually happens throughout the day because I have lines. What am I gonna do? But all right, we're gonna wear this and I'll come back and give you my final feedback. All right guys, so we're here with the final check-in for this wear test. We're about 5 hours in and I think the foundation looks good. It's warmed up with my skin. It hasn't oxidized, so it hasn't deepened at all. I've gotten a little shiny in my typical areas, so in my forehead, around my nose. I already blotted my nose, which is just grabbing like a napkin and pressing it over my nose to absorb the oil, and I'll do that to the rest of my face as well. But you see that I got a little shiny, nothing that I can't dab away, which is what I typically do anyway because I have really oily skin. But it looks good. It hasn't worn down or anything. And this time around, I didn't have as much settling in my lines around my mouth. So they're usually, this is typical wear for me. There might be a little bit of settling because I laugh, I talk a lot, of expression lines around my mouth. So it's going to create some creasing, but this doesn't look as bad as the last time. In my forehead area, it's a little bit cakey, but not as much. But under my eyes is where I think you can really tell where I have the wear. This concealer still creased, even though I set it with a different powder. So what I can tell, and I'll tell you right now, straight out the gate, I don't like the concealer because it creases, and it creases easily even when I set it. And I don't have that problem with my favorite concealer. So this won't be replacing any of my favorites. I will still keep it in the rotation because I do like the color of it. But I'm gonna have to play around with it a lot more to find a way that I can wear it without it really creasing. Even though the minimal creasing that it's doing today, I can manage because I can just blend that out. But there are days when it has creased worse, and it creases more than any other concealer I've worn, whether it's drugstore or higher end, which is interesting because it does say it sets down, you don't have to set it. And yeah, it creases. So I don't love the concealer, but I do prefer the 385 shade on me. I do like this a lot, and I think I'm gonna get the foundation as well in the 385 because I do like the foundation. I just feel like the shade hasn't been my perfect match, and the 385 I think I'm gonna work with. So 360, 385, those are my shades. Love the foundation. Don't like the concealer as much. It's just okay. It's not a great concealer. It has medium coverage. I wouldn't call it full coverage. The medium coverage makes it a little bit more wearable for me, so it doesn't look heavy and it doesn't look like separate from my foundation. So I do like the coverage. I just don't like that it creases. I do like the brightening and kind of lifting quality it has to the shade, so I'm gonna keep it. I won't necessarily use it on the rest of my face, like around my dark areas. I'll use my other concealer for this, but this is not a concealer that I would necessarily return. I just wouldn't recommend that you go and pick it up unless you want to try it out yourself, but it's not a concealer that I would go out of my way to say, hey, this is a must-have. It's just not hitting all the points that I need it to hit. For the powder itself, I like the color of it for overall setting. I don't like it under the eyes because I think it's very dry and it looks very cakey, and it can build up and look cakey really quickly. I do like it though over other foundations that I've tried it with, so I haven't just used it with the Fenty. If it's a dewier foundation, if it's a more luminous foundation, or if it's more satin in finish, I find like the powder works nicely. I do like the color of it. I like how finely milled it is. I like how lightweight it feels. But at the same time, I wouldn't layer this up. I would do a very light dusting of this. I would use this as a finishing powder over a setting powder because I feel like it does emphasize pores. It does emphasize texture, and it makes your skin just look a little bit more dry than you probably want it to look. So not my favorite powder. Again, I'm keeping it because I like the color of it. I like how it feels on the skin, but I have to be careful how I apply it to my skin and what foundations I use it with. So this is, again, not on my recommendations list. Overall, I just think the products are okay. They're just decent. There's nothing mind-blowing about these. There's nothing great about these apart from the shade range that I can say the shade range is great. But even so, I still can't even find my perfect match. So those are my final thoughts. Not like, oh my god, these are awesome products. They're okay. They're just okay. And that's all I got for you. So we're gonna end it there, and I'm gonna go ahead and leave links to where you can pick this up at Sephora online. That is an affiliate link, which means I will get a small sales commission if you purchase through those links. If you're not comfortable with that, just feel free to shop the way you normally shop. No muss, no fuss. But if you do shop through my links, thank you so much, because it does help me to put right back into the channel. I will also leave links to my Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook page. Not Facebook. Oh my god, not Facebook. I don't even do Facebook. Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat, where you should definitely be checking me out. And until my next video, which will be very soon, I'll talk to you. Bye, guys.